Hello guys, my name is Nyarai Malaila. I'm an international student, international relations student at Africa University. I'm doing international relations. So today I'm going to discuss some on human rights, constitutionalism, and democracy. So I will give you a historical background of human rights. What are the human rights? The type of human rights, how are they violated, like how these human rights are violated in the world at large, but I will be focusing on Africa. Then I will go on to look on issues about constitutionalism. What is it? Like how how African countries adopted to constitutions when they don't know anything about constitutionalism. Then I'm going to talk about how to link the human rights, the constitutionalism with democracy. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the history of the human rights. So after a series of wars in Europe, the nations in 1815 decided to meet at the Vienna conference, where they were negotiating peace because many people were being killed. So they decided to meet and discuss on how they can maintain peace in Europe and in the world as well. And when they decide on the Vienna conference, the agreements didn't serve justice to the people. So Wilson come up with the 14 points, which formed the League of All Nations. And finally, it didn't serve justice to human rights, because we can see there was wars and many people were killed. Like there was the Nazi movement, like for Germany, which leave about 2 million, more than 2 million Jews killed. And this finally led to the Declaration of Human Rights in 1945. That was the formation of the United Nations. Okay, so in 1948, there was the formation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, when the nations gathered and they were against the Nazi policy of genocide, which was adopted by Germany. So they come and the European countries gathered around to see a solution on how they can stop Germany from this genocide. That marks the declaration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1946. When the Universal Human Rights was established, there was many treaties were signed, which were peace treaties, and people start to show concern in human rights. So I'm going to move on to what are rights. Human rights are fundamental entitlements which are given to people, and we have got 3 categories of rights. We have got the civil political rights, and we have got the social economic rights, as well as the environmental, cultural, and developmental rights. In this discourse, I'm going to focus on civil political rights, because this is linked to issues to do with democracy. So civil political rights, these are sometimes referred to liberty-oriented or first-generation rights. These are given to people so that people are able to choose what they want in life in terms of political parties, freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom to vote members, to vote for members who will present them in parliaments and in governments. So these civil political rights, they are enshrined in most constitutions in Africa. But there is a problem because these rights, they are enshrined in constitutions, but the leaders, the African leaders, they are not practicing or they are not implementing these rights. In case like most Africans, when they want to do like elections, there is tendency of violating these civil political rights. Most people are deprived of their rights of association, to choose their political party of their own, the freedom of expression. Because as you can see, there are many people who are detained because of freedom of expression. They are detained because they have said their mind, what they are thinking is not allowed. And this, by so doing, the principles of democracy are violated. Because in a democracy, in a democratic country, everyone have the right to say what they want at the time they want. They have got the freedom to choose who they want to lead them. So we can see that this human rights thing sometimes is just like it's just like a discourse, but in reality, the human rights, they are violated every day. So I'm going to talk about the constitution. What is a constitution? I understand the constitution as the like the supreme law, the overall law of the government. Everyone and every leader is under the law, is the supreme law of the country. But in the cases of Africa, we can see that the leaders can violate like the whatever is enshrined in the constitution at a given time to suit their political gains and their political taste, and they are violating the human rights. We can link this to the Rwandan genocide, like when there was disputes in Rwanda and the involvement of NATO in Rwanda, which caused the death of many people. That's depriving people their fundamental rights, the right to life. And there are international actors which are involved or which intervene in African like disputes and conflicts, which stir up the tension in Africa. So basically what I'm talking about is that the human rights, they are there. Yes, we know that the human rights are there, but they are not meant for us people. They are meant for leaders, because they are only benefit, they are manipulated to benefit the leaders in Africa. Then we move on to talk about the social economic rights. These sometimes refer to the second orientation. Those are basically called the second generation rights, because they provide social and economic security to the people. Like their rights protect people from having basic things taken away from them, such as food, shelter, and healthcare. can see like the social and economic rights, they are there in the constitutions of most African countries, but basically these rights, they are partially delivered to people because, like for example, in South Africa, the citizens can get some of these things, but when it comes to Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, like people, they are not given like food, shelter, and healthcare for free. Like the healthcare is mostly for free in South Africa, but here in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, you have to pay to get healthy care. So these rights, the government just put it on paper, but they are not delivered to the people. So moving on, we are talking about the environmental, cultural, and developmental rights. These have been referred to the third generation. They recognize that people have the right to live in an environment that is clean, free of pollution, and protected from destruction, and also recognize that group of people should have the right to culture, political, and economic development. So in some of the parts of the Africa, some parts of Africa like DRC Congo, every citizen has the right to live in a clean and in a clean environment, but because of mining activities which are being done by international investors in some of the parts of DRC, like the people that deprived of their right to live in a pollution-free environment, and some of them they live under the threat of natural disaster because of the activities, mining activities which are being done in those areas. So basically that's the overall overview of human rights. So moving on, like we are looking at structuring democratic government to reduce the power of the abuse of power. So what shall we do as a government to reduce like the abuse of power by our leaders? So there is need for separation of powers. That means the legislative must be independent from the judiciary, and the judiciary must be independent from the executive. But we are trying to say that the executive must have their own decision which are not interfered by the judiciary, and when the judiciary are making their own decision, no the second part or third part must interfere in their decision. But in case of Africa, it is difficult to separate these powers, because like the judiciary is more like answerable to the executive. The executive, that means the president and the prime minister, the prime ministers, and the executive, that means the parliament and whatsoever. So like they are interlinked, we can't separate them. So we can see that it is very difficult to separate these things so that we can have a democratic environment, and have a environment which is conducive for every citizen. So we're moving on, like we are going to talk about the Bill of Rights. Once democratic structure have been set up, people in many countries also choose to protect individuals from possible abuse of power by adopting a Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights is a list of freedoms and rights guaranteed to every people in a country. Protection of the kind are often similar to those listed in the international human rights documents. So I think there is a problem when like for people to access these rights in the Bill of Rights, because in the first place, this Bill of Rights, this like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was made by the European countries, and the universality party is not very clear, because it was only the European powers which gazetted the Universal Declaration of Rights. So the Asians, the Africans, they were not catered for in the rights. So the culture, like the human rights, they are mainly dominated in the Western culture. So it's very difficult for other continents to adopt to these rights. That's when we see that there is a question remaining about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, like, moving on, we have got the rule of law. Like the rule of law, everyone have to participate. Like the government, everyone is under the rule of law. Everyone is answerable to the rule of law, and everyone must be attached to these laws. So basically, that is what I was going to talk about. Like, what are human rights? You've got social political rights, you have got the social economic, civil and political rights. We've got the third generation, that is environmental, that is the group rights. Then we talked about constitution, like what is a constitution, and I highlighted that a constitution is the supreme law in the country, and everyone is under that law. Then I linked everything to democracy, that like if you have a functional constitution in a country, the country is guaranteed democracy. But here in Africa, we don't have like a country which have got a functional constitution. That means we don't have like democracy. We've got dictatorship, autocracy leaders, we've got authoritarian. So it's very difficult to say that we have got democracy in Africa. So basically, thank you guys for listening to my presentation. I thank you. I hope you learned something and you enjoyed. Thank you.